Welcome along, strange historians. This is the Strange History Podcast. I hopefully am your favorite strange historian. Before I begin, please like and share this episode and subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. Oh, and do me a favor and check out the links below to learn how to support my channel. So now sit back and pour yourself a cup of coffee or a tankard of tea or a mug of mead or a chalice of cider or a flagon filled with any beverage of your choice and join your fellow strange historians around the campfire. Today is March 13th, 1964. It is nearly 3 o'clock in the morning. You're in Queens, New York, about 12 miles east of Manhattan. A 28-year-old woman named Catherine Genovese, her friends and family called her Kitty, recently left the bar where she works, and she gets into her red Fiat. She has been working many hours in hopes of saving enough money to open her own restaurant. She is eager to get home to her apartment and to be with her girlfriend, Mary Ann Zelenko. They live at 82-70 Austin Street in Kew Gardens, a bit less than 5 miles from the bar. While waiting for a traffic light to change on Hoover Avenue, she turns up the radio and listens to a brand new song called I Want to Hold Your Hand by a British band called The Beatles. The song was just released in February. While the light is still red, she does not realize that she is being watched by a man named Winston Moseley. He has been sitting in his parked Chevrolet. Mr. Moseley was born in 1935. He is 29 years old. He is from Ozone Park, Queens, and he works as a tab operator preparing the punch cards that are used for data input for digital computers. Mr. Moseley is married. He has 3 children. He has no criminal record. But that's only because he has never been caught. You see, Mr. Moseley is a small-time thief. Mr. Moseley is also a serial killer. In fact, he has already murdered at least 2 other women. Tonight, he has been driving around looking for a woman to kill. He prefers killing women. He says they're easier to kill and they don't fight back. He's also a rapist. In fact, he is a necrophile. And so Genovese drives through Queens in these early hours, and she listens to songs by the Beach Boys, the Chiffons, Bobby Vinton, and Bobby Darin. Even though this is not Manhattan, and there aren't many people walking around, there are still plenty of cars and taxis and trucks on the road. After all, there are always New Yorkers that need to be going somewhere or making deliveries at all hours of the day and night. But Kew Gardens is a quiet and pretty residential neighborhood that began to be developed in the late 19th century. It's kind of artsy, and a lot of residents are survivors of the Holocaust. And so the cars and the people begin to thin out as Kitty gets closer and closer to her home. And when she does, around 3:15 a.m., she parks her car, as she always does, in the parking lot of the Kew Gardens Long Island Railroad Station. It is conveniently located about 100 feet from the door of the apartment building where she lives. Kitty turns off the radio, unlatches her seatbelt, and turns off the car. And she opens the door to her car. And she steps out. She closes the door and she locks it. She then puts the keys in her pocket and begins to walk toward the apartment complex where she lives. Kitty and her girlfriend live in a grand, historic, and architecturally significant two-story English Tudor building that was built in 1925. The building has corner gables and a slate-covered roof. The exterior is covered with stucco, but there are exposed bricks around the windows and exposed beams along the street side. On the ground floor are businesses. There are material canopies above the storefront windows. On the top floor are residential apartments with oak floors and high ceilings. Kitty does not realize that Mr. Mosley followed her home. He parked at a corner bus stop on Austin Street. While she was preparing to leave her car, he exited his vehicle. And now he is standing in the parking lot. He is watching her. In his hand is a hunting knife. Suspecting that she hears something, she turns and sees Mr. Mosley. Kitty quickens her pace. But rather than going toward the entry to her apartment building, she stays along the street and is walking toward a box where she can call the police. Before she can reach it, Mr. Mosley catches up to her. He raises his hand with his hunting knife and he brings it down into her back. She stumbles forward and he stabs at her again, this time puncturing her lung. Before all air leaves her lungs, she manages to scream out, "Oh my God! He stabbed me! Help me!" Across the street is a 9-story apartment building built in 1927. It is made up of red bricks and there are ornate friezes along the street. And within the courtyard entry are numerous windows and balconies. Some of the residents of that building hear Kitty cry out, but they're unable to distinguish whether or not it is a cry for help. After all, this is New York. There are always people walking around. It's not unreasonable to hear people laughing or screaming or fighting. It's just another night in a big city. However, one resident, a man named Robert Moser, looks out his open window. He's not sure what's going on. It's dark out there on the street, but either way he shouts out, "Let that girl alone!" This is sufficient to stop Mosley, who then turns and runs away. And as soon as she is convinced that her attacker is gone, Kitty conjures up all her energy she can to stand. Watching from his car window, Mosley sees her get up and watches her walk away from where he left her. He now knew that she wasn't dead. Kitty is in horrible pain, and clearly she's not thinking straight. At this point, her best option would be to walk about 50 feet to the corner where she'll be on a major boulevard where someone will see her. Or maybe to cross the street to enter the lobby of the building that she is standing right in front of. But instead, Kitty turns, and she walks back towards the parking lot, turns left alongside the building where she lives. And at this point, she is now back in the shadows and out of the view of anyone in the building who could see her or help her. Now, a resident in the building across the street calls the police. Now, these are the days before 911, so he has to call the phone number of the local precinct, and he reports that a woman was, and this is a quote, beat up, but she got up and was staggering around. End quote. And so Kitty keeps on walking, and then she turns left along the rear entrance of the building. No one knows she's here. No one can see her. No one can hear her. It is unlikely anyone will be passing by anytime soon who can help her. Without a shadow of a doubt, this is the absolute worst place that Kitty could be right now. But clearly, in the deepest recesses of her mind, like anybody else who's in pain and scared, they just want to go home. And that has to be what Kitty is thinking. She just wants to go home. Meanwhile, Mosley waited in his car for about 10 minutes. He then put on a wide-brimmed hat, got out of his car, still holding onto his hunting knife, and returned to where he was before. He is hunting. He is hunting Kitty Genovese. He is determined to find her and kill her. And so he searches the parking lot. He doesn't see her. He searches the train station. He doesn't see her. He looks around the apartment complex. He finds her. Kitty is barely conscious. She is on the floor in a hallway at the back of the building. She is at the bottom of the stairs. Why on earth? She thinks that she could, in that condition, walk back up to her apartment is anyone's guess. She's delirious. She's frightened. She wants to go home. As soon as Kitty sees Mosley, she starts screaming. So he leans down and he stabs her a few other times to stop her from screaming. And she puts up her hands to stop him, but to no avail. He then stabs her once in the neck. She can no longer scream. She can only moan. Once he is convinced that she is of no further threat, to be able to identify him, and all life has essentially left her, Mosley removes her undergarments. And after brutalizing her with his knife, he then sexually assaults her. He then steals her wallet, keys, and some cosmetics. He then leaves her there to die, all alone. Even though no one saw the final assault, at this point, a resident named Carl Ross had called a friend to ask their advice on what he should do. You see, his concern is that, well, since he's gay, he doesn't want to draw any attention to himself. Carl has also been drinking. Despite all this, he finally calls the police. A neighbor named Sophia Farrar also heard a scream, but when she and her husband looked out the window, they didn't see anyone or anything, so they went back to sleep. However, Sophia soon got a call from a neighbor saying Kitty had been attacked. So she quickly gets dressed and she runs to the entry to Kitty's apartment. Now, Sophia has no idea, how could she, what will be waiting for her. For all she knows, she's going to run into whoever attacked Kitty and her life will be in danger. But she is concerned about her friend and she will deal with whatever comes her way. When she reaches the door leading to where Kitty was, well, She quickly pushes it open, and she sees her friend on the floor, dying in a pool of blood. She quickly cradles Kitty in her arms and speaks with her and reassures her, telling her she's going to be all right. You're going to be all right. You're going to be all right, Kitty. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. It's okay. It's okay. The police are on their way. The police are on their way. The police are coming. Don't worry. It'll be okay. You'll be all right. The police arrive within 2 minutes. At 4:15 a.m., the paramedics arrive. They put Kitty on a gurney and carry her to the ambulance, and they race off. Despite their best efforts to save her, after having been stabbed 14 times, Kitty Genovese dies en route to the hospital. Nearly 3 hours later, at 7 a.m., there was a knock on the door of the apartment that Kitty shared with her girlfriend, Marianne Zelenko. Marianne is told that Kitty has been hurt, and so she's brought downstairs, and she sees the chalk line where Kitty was found, and yellow tape to mark off the crime scene. Marianne is brought to the hospital to identify Kitty's body. She is then questioned by detectives, and initially she is considered to be a suspect. Kitty was buried 3 days after her murder on March 16, 1964, in Lakeview Cemetery in New Canaan, Connecticut. On March 19, 1964, 6 days after the stabbing, Mosley was arrested for suspected robbery in Ozone Park after a TV set was discovered in the trunk of his car. Mosley's car was searched after a local man, Raoul Cleary, became suspicious when he saw Mosley removing the television from a neighbor's house. Cleary questioned Mosley, who claimed to be a removal worker. However, after consulting another neighbor, Jack Brown, who confirmed that the homeowners were not moving, Cleary called the police. Brown disabled Mosley's car to ensure he could not get away before police arrived. A detective recalled that a white car similar to Mosley's had been reported by some of the witnesses to Kitty Genovese's murder, and he informed Detective Carroll and sang. During questioning, Mosley admitted to the murder of Genovese and admitted to the murders of 2 other women, Annie Mae Johnson, who had been shot and burned to death in her apartment in South Ozone Park a few weeks earlier, and 15-year-old Barbara Kralik, who had been killed in her parents' Springfield Gardens home the previous July. Mosley confessed to murdering and sexually assaulting 2 other women and to committing between 30 and 40 burglaries. Let's talk about the bystander effect and the Genovese syndrome. The bystander effect, or bystander apathy, is a social, psychological theory that states that individuals are less likely to offer help to a victim when there are other people present. If a single individual is asked to complete the task alone, the sense of responsibility will be strong, and there will be a positive response. However, if a group is required to complete the task together, each individual in the group will have a weak sense of responsibility and will often shrink back in the face of difficulties or responsibilities. This may indicate that a person is nosy or rude. As a result, passers-by are more likely to be keeping their attention to themselves when around large groups than when alone. People who are alone are more likely to be conscious of their surroundings and therefore more likely to notice a person in need of their assistance. Once a situation has been noticed, a bystander may be encouraged to intervene if they interpret the incident as an emergency. According to the principle of social influence, bystanders monitor the reactions of other people in an emergency situation to see if others think that it is necessary to intervene. If it is determined that others are not reacting to the situation, bystanders will interpret the situation as not an emergency and will not intervene. An article published an American psychologist in 2007 found the story of Genovese's murder had been exaggerated by the media. There were far fewer than 38 witnesses. The police were called at least once during the attack, and many of the bystanders who overheard the attack could not actually see the event. In 2016, the New York Times called its own reporting, it's a quote, flawed, end quote, stating that the original story, it's another quote, grossly exaggerated the number of witnesses and what they perceived, end quote. So what do you think? What would you have done if you were in that building across the street and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you heard somebody scream out? Would you assume that somebody else is going to take care of it? Or would you call the police? Or would you go to the window and see what's going on? Or would you go downstairs and try to help somebody who's screaming? What would you do? Have you ever experienced the bystander effect or the Genovese syndrome? I would really love to know what you think about the bystander effect and the Genovese syndrome, and what you would have done or what you think you would have done in a similar situation. So please let me know in the comments below. And so this concludes this episode of the Strange History Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, kindly like, share, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell. If you want to support my research and hear more shows like this, please click on the link below so you can see how you can make a donation directly to me, and also join me on other platforms where I post exclusive content. And of course, I will appreciate it if you could leave a super thanks below. Kindly be kind to all non-human animals, and please don't eat them. They don't like it. Take my word for it. And please do yourself a favor and go to a local shelter and adopt a cat or a dog. You and they will be very glad that you did. Until next time, I wish you safe travels on all your journeys.